Watch this.
In just 83 days, the people of Boise are going to decide who's going to be the next mayor of the city of trees. Now, within this window of like 90 days or so, campaigns, this is when they usually ramp up for their final stretch run at that office. Today, we're going to take a look at the top two contenders in this race. That'd be incumbent Mayor Lauren McLean and retired Boise Police Chief Mike Masterson. We're going to look at how they stack up when it comes to campaign finances. So this is where Joe Paris does some math.
There are a few different windows into the campaign finances of the candidates that want to lead Idaho's most populated city. We'll circle back to all of this after the election, but for now, the fundraising presents an interesting story. Less than 90 days until Decision Day in the Boise mayoral race, and already close to $400,000 has been raised for two top candidates, Mayor Lauren McLean and challenger Mike Masterson. Tracking back to January 1st of this year, Mayor Lauren McLean has raised $263,308 from 626 individual donors. In the same time frame, Mike Masterson has raised $152,081 from 390 individual donors. So from January 1st to the beginning of this year, McLean has seen more financial support in terms of dollar amount and individual donors. But it is important to note that McLean has been in the race, at least officially, longer than Masterson. She received her first contribution the first week of the year, while Masterson's donation started rolling in on March 24th, the day after his paperwork to run for office was finalized. So let's take a look at that window first. For March 24th until now, the McLean campaign has raised $165,663 from 428 donors. In the same time frame, Masterson raised $152,081 from 390 donors. Masterson officially launched his campaign with an event on May 23rd, about 2 months after his first donation was submitted. So from May 23rd until now, there is a slightly different story than the previous windows. Since May 23rd, Masterson has raised $108,080 from 268 different donors. McLean has raised $79,880 from 212 donors during the same stretch. Masterson takes the lead in that specific window. Overall, since the beginning of the year, the McLean and Masterson campaigns have raised a total of $416,389 from 1,016 donors, with still several weeks to go.
So those numbers will continue to update. So if you go check our math as soon as tomorrow, you might see that there's even more donations coming in. But 53,303 people in Boise voted in the last mayoral race. Remember 2019, what a different time. You need to remember, though, combined between the two campaigns, only 1,000 people have donated since the beginning of this year. So no matter how much you donate, you only get one vote. Of note, though, McLean raised $244,150 in her 2019 race against Dave Beater. She's outraised herself already with still about 90 days to go. But Brian, we will be interested, I should say, to be tracking this to the final months of the race and financially to see if it makes a difference. A note for you, of course, people are capped at $1,000 per candidate as a maximum donation in the city races here in Idaho. It'll be interesting to see over the next 90 days if there's a lot of movement in this or if this is kind of going to stay set. And if you're curious what the campaigns are really spending money on, a lot of it communications, strategy, PR. If you look into some of their spending, a lot of it is trying to position the campaign to figure out what they're going to do over the next few weeks.
What should this, or why should this matter to the regular Joe this far out from the race? Like how much money people are donating and who is doing that?
I think it's interesting because it shows how many people are actually donating and how many people are actually voting. And when you talk about the people that are giving money and the direction they hope that the city goes compared to people that are just voting on election day, it's one of these things where we can put a stick in the mud and come back to this in several months and say, okay, well, they raised this much and it worked out to being worth $100 per vote or $250 per vote. When we looked back to the Beater-McLean stuff, and that also included a runoff back in 2019. It was interesting to see that even though the Beater campaign had really out-fundraised McLean during the general cycle, once they got into that runoff, which was just final two candidates, McLean actually was out-raising Beater. So it was interesting to kind of see the differences there, and I'll be interesting to compare and contrast this race and that
where
one.
it's coming from matters.
Yes, it does. And this is actually very cool. The state of Idaho, they have this sunshine report, which is basically putting sunshine on all the information, all the documents that used to be harder to access before high-speed high-speed technology. So we actually have a link to this story that we'll have on our website in a little bit, and you can go through the Boise mayoral race, you can go through legislative races, you can go through all these state races to figure out how much money candidates are raising and really what they're spending it on as well. It's very comprehensive, and it's not just unique to the Boise race. If there's something going on in your neighborhood, maybe a mayoral race, you can check the same portal online.
Thanks, Joe. We will be checking back. I appreciate it. All right. Well, it's a 5-year appointment, or at least it was, because this one only lasted about 8 months. That's how long ago the Ada County Commissioners made the controversial decision to appoint a career politician to the Central District Health Board. Today, we learned Attorney General Raul Labrador is stepping down from that position. Ada County spokeswoman and Labrador's office confirmed to KTVB he submitted a letter of resignation today. Excuse me. It'll be effective on Friday. And that's coming after the next CDH board meeting. In his letter, first reported by the Idaho Statesman, Labrador says he's, excuse me, quote, proud of the efforts and successes that we have achieved in balancing the public health, safety, and personal liberties of our fellow citizens. Former U.S. Congressman has served on the board since January of 2021, when 2 of the 3 Ada County commissioners, both Republican, put him in that spot. And it's worth mentioning that happened before he was decided on or even ran for and elected as Idaho's Attorney General. When we asked his office why he's deciding to do this resignation now, they just pointed us to the letter as an explanation, which really didn't include one. His appointment, you might remember, was clouded in controversy as it came during the heat of the pandemic when public health mandates became a point of contention. That appointment was viewed as a political one because that seat that he took over usually filled by a county commissioner. At the time, Diana Lacchiando, who was not elected to that position, taken over by Ryan Davidson, who then said he did not want to fill that seat. So he and Rod Beck got together and appointed Raul Labrador. Ada County spokeswoman says commissioners are going to fill Labrador's seat as soon as possible. Their goal is to do it before October 20th, which is the next meeting after this next one. Central District Health, by the way, covers Ada, Valley, Boise, and Elmore counties. All right, first day of school for Treasure Valley students, and this school year is starting a little differently than expected for some of those students, meaning the transgender students. Before last week, because of Senate Bill 1100 that went into effect this summer, any transgender student would be forced to use the bathroom or locker room that coincides with their birth gender, not the gender with which they identify. But last week, a federal judge temporarily blocked the enforcement of that law, while the lawsuit against it makes its way through the courts, which basically took school policies back to before the transgender bathroom bill became law. So what does that mean? How many schools will be impacted by this? Well, earlier this year, we covered the Caldwell School District extensively when their board tried to implement a gender identity inclusion policy, what became known as Policy 3281. What we learned at that time was there were nearly 24 school districts, other school districts, out of the 117 in Idaho that had such a policy in place or something similar. For example, Blaine County School District, they had a similar policy in place, have had one since 2016. And we were told then they've had 0 reported instances of a student abusing that policy to the detriment of others. That was according to their superintendent. We also learned Idaho School Boards Association helped write the model for 3281 because of demand from several school districts. Today, we learned, after last week's court ruling, ISBA sent out guidance to its member districts to explain what the restraining order or the temporary restraining order means to them. And basically, it means school districts just do nothing. If your school district had a gender inclusion policy for bathrooms and locker rooms before SB 1100, well, then it's still in play. If yours didn't, well, then you still don't. As far as the lawsuit against Senate Bill 1100, there's a hearing scheduled for September 13th. Hyde Park's a happening place in a happy neighborhood. So when Hyde Park closed their doors abruptly and didn't pay their employees, the restaurant that was there, people were kind of perplexed. But you know the saying, when one door closes, another opens. And Daniel took advantage, the new owner of that building, took advantage, or the new renter of that building, took advantage of that open door.
People come in and, leave us sweet nothings. The most divine things in life are the things that have time to grow and live in us. Silence, patience, and the waiting bring the most of the joy to the moments. Love this moment with food, Kate. This just reminds me of why we're doing what we're doing and makes me so proud. Aparicena is a dream come true for me. I've always wanted to open restaurants. Getting this property really came out of nowhere for us.
One popular North End joint just shut their doors like suddenly, leaving many employees jobless. Their staff had little notice of the shutdown, and when they tried to cash their final paychecks, well, they bounced.
So I saw the articles from KTVB, the employees not being paid and them kind of just shuttering their doors overnight, and I could not believe it. It all was really heartbreaking.
We're going to be really careful on who we rent it to next, that it's going to be a viable, amazing part of the community.
And I immediately called her, and she was busy at the moment, but it was something like 3 hours later. I was here meeting with her, looking at the property, and it was a wreck, but I was able to see through all of that and see the potential. And the next day, we had signed an agreement, and by the end of the week, this was in progress. We only have one life to live, and you are responsible to figure out what is going to make you the happiest. And for me, that was food and sharing it with people. I had always wanted to open restaurants, but I was afraid. I had a health crisis a few years back in 2019. After fainting, I called 911, and shortly after that, I went into cardiac arrest. I had 2 saddle pulmonary embolisms in each of my lungs, and that caused, complete organ failure. I had a heart attack as a byproduct of all of that. And the whole time I was on life support, I just kept thinking about all of the things that I didn't do. And this was the big one for me.
Welcome in, guys. I'll be right with you.
It's everything to me.
Can you agree? Absolutely.
I'm honored to get to do this every day.
Pasta Pomodoro.
To have been able to open my first brick and mortar concept at 28 is something that I will forever be immensely proud of.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll give you guys some time.
I don't think that there is anything that brings me as much joy as what I'm doing now, and I know this is just the beginning of what we will do here.
It is just the beginning. That restaurant is doing so well, they're planning on opening a second one just down the street. Danielle says it's going to be a French bistro named after her grandmother. And like this one, it's also going to be that farm or fresh farm to table kind of ingredients that, well, you can also feel good about. New bistro is going to be across from the Boise Co-op. That's where the former 4th Street station was. Then coming up in September, next month, September 17th, the Boise Co-op is going to shut down the parking lot there, pretty much throw a block party for their 50th anniversary, which is why Danielle says this would be a perfect time to open her next bistro. It's been a big summer for Idaho's rivers. Some of them swole from all the rainfall that has been pulled in southern Idaho, helping us get out of a drought in most of the state. Boise River reported records for the float season so far. There's still a little bit left to go. And Idaho Fish and Game just stocked the Boise River with 300 salmon for anglers to hook onto there. So what's the catch? Well, for some, it's walleye. They're a growing population in Idaho rivers right now. As we reported this yesterday, the predatory fish starting to gain ground on our native salmon, which is why they want you out there catching these walleye, pulling them out of the water. But there's another catch out there. Andrew Bartline learned of a new, I guess you could call it a predatory species that could be taking away some of the headlines today.
You
Dare I
guess.
say a land shark or a shark?
It is a salmon shark specifically. And
What?
I don't know what you mean by I guess.
A
That's
new
like
species?
Here it is.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not sharks in Idaho, so you can be half right, I guess, saying that, Brian. And a collection of calls and emails hit up Idaho Fish and Game this week about a shark spotting in Riggins, as Brian just said. And that shark, though, it's all teeth with really no bite.
We started getting some calls about a shark on the beach. Obviously left us scratching our heads there. Some of the callers assured us that, yes, they know what a shark looks like and it's a shark. And, you know, spoiler alert, we went down and there was a dead shark on the beach.
You found a dead shark on the beach around Riggins?
Yes.
Roger Phillips is the Idaho Fish and Game spokesperson.
Our crew's identified as a salmon shark. We know these things can't fly. They can't survive in fresh water. So, you know, kind of narrows it down. Somebody left it there.
Why would somebody do anything like that?
That's a fair question, but since we're sitting here talking about it, maybe that's what they had in mind, is just a good prank and, you know, maybe tip of the hat to them. Here we are.
How many people reached out to you and said, hey, Fish and Game, I'm seeing a shark in Riggins by the salmon?
Well, we got several calls down there and it's kind of blown up on social media. No big surprise. A dead shark on the beach in Idaho tends to, you know, gather some attention.
I have this like funny perception in my head of Fish and Game conducting an investigation on something like this.
When we went and looked at it, our guys looked at it and said, yep, that's a shark, and grabbed it and took it and threw it in the freezer. So if somebody lost their pet shark, we've got it. We would appreciate it if people didn't haul fish from the coast over and dump them in Idaho, or dump any fish in Idaho for that matter. But as far as, you know, this being a real environmental concern, it's one small dead fish.
I saw you guys had some fun when you announced this in your press release.
Well, why wouldn't we have a little fun, you know? Because when this thing blows up and people are saying, is this real? Well, yeah, in this case it is. And it's a fairly small shark, so I don't think we're going to need a bigger boat.
So no harm to the local environment, no harm to the local salmon like walleye, but still a real shark. It's just a dead shark.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if you're quite an angler yourself. You don't need a bigger boat.
That was a great line pulled from Jaws there. I can't imagine the smell on that beach, though, when they went down to investigate this thing with a dead shark. How long? They don't even know how long it'd been there?
It probably hadn't been alive long. He says the only place he knows they could have really caught it from would be like the Pacific coast.
Yeah.
So I would assume like off the coast of Oregon.
And drive it all the way in.
That's 5-hour drive, probably more. It's a long way, so it probably wasn't smelling good, probably hasn't been alive too long. And yeah, those things can't live in fresh water anyway, so.
Well, if you're looking for attention, you just got it. Congratulations.
I know, it was a big win.
Thanks, Andrew.
Well, we've got some record-breaking heat to talk about on this August day. Officially 105 degrees in Boise, still hanging out at 107 in Ontario, and lots of other triple-digit temperatures in other Treasure Valley spots. In the mountains, we are in the 90s, and in Magic Valley spots, we're nearing that 100-degree mark, but falling just a touch short. And as I mentioned, we're talking about breaking records today, so we broke the record at that 105-degree mark. The previous record for Boise is 103 degrees set in 2020, and what's still sitting at 107. We're falling just a little bit short of the record for Ontario. And Mountain Home, we're still sitting at 103, so just a little bit short. And at that 98-degree mark, we're just, again, 1 degree short for the record over in Twin Falls. And as we go into this evening, it's not going to stay comfortable for much of the evening hours, really only getting below 80 degrees for about 6 hours, around 2 a.m. till 8 a.m. in the morning. And so you can see we're staying in the 90s all the way into the evening, not even dropping out of the 80s at midnight. So unfortunately, not a great day to push yourself outside. And we are expecting a slight cool down as we go into the next few days. So you can see 100 degrees is the expected high on Thursday, then getting towards the 90s, upper end of the 90s on Friday and Saturday. But we do have some changes on the way for us. We're expecting to be impacted by the forecast of Tropical Storm Hillary. Yes, our forecast will depend on what a tropical storm does over the next few days. So Hillary was officially named, and it is expected to strengthen to a Category 3 hurricane by Saturday, and then it will continue to move north and make landfall, expected right now, in California as a tropical storm, and then it will quickly weaken to a tropical low, and then we are expected to see some of that moisture move more north. So as the tropical storm makes its way north in California, Nevada, and Arizona, we could see flooding and landslides, and then we've got, for our area, during that same time frame Sunday, we could see localized flooding potential during that time. Monday as well, we'll see some of that moisture from that storm. But depending on the track it takes, if it goes a little bit more inland and moving overland and making landfall more towards Mexico, then that will change our forecast. But we will be seeing more moisture from the south all the way through next week. You can see even Tuesday seeing a little bit more of that as well. So as we go into today, things staying on the drier side, and sure, it's certainly hot, as I mentioned earlier. But tomorrow we're going to see some changes in the form of some storm chances. So the greatest model agreement is that between Mountain Home and the Magic Valley, we'll see some stronger storms, and I wouldn't rule them out for higher elevation locations either. So tomorrow could turn a bit stormy for us. You could see afterwards we get a little bit of clearing in the overnight hours. However, Friday morning, we're looking at some more chances of rainfall for valley spots. So again, Thursday, we're cooling down slightly by 5 degrees, so 100 degrees is the expected high. 96 for both Friday and Saturday expected right now. Then Sunday, we dip out of the 90s and get into the upper 80s. But then we start to see more of that moisture start to work its way in. And this forecast, as it is right now, again, all depends on that tropical system and how that moves. That will dictate where that moisture goes. But as of right now, we are taking a bit of a more stormy turn as we go into next week. And you can see temperatures reflecting that as well, with the high expected 84 degrees on Monday. Things warming up very slightly as we go towards the end of that, but those storm chances will be sticking around. Brian will be right back after this break with your comments.
Let's get to your comments. This one from Michael, who was commenting on the fact that the transgender bathroom bill has been put on hold while they figured out what's going on with it in the courts. Over 100 school districts, all the more reason for them all to be subject to the same set of rules and guidelines and standards. Well, I don't know if you've heard about local control, Michael, but that was kind of the argument that, especially during COVID, and especially at the legislature, that, well, that's where that should happen. So we shouldn't have the same standards and guidelines from school district to school district because, well, everybody has different needs depending on who they serve. A couple of numbers to clear up for you. We know it takes a little longer to drive to the Oregon coast than 5 hours. We get that. It's not 5 hours. It's a little more like 8. And I mentioned an 8-month appointment is actually a year and 8 months for Raul Labrador on the CDH board. This coming in from Ryan Davidson. It's been a privilege to have the Attorney General of Idaho serve on our local health board. We needed someone who understood that mask mandates, shutdowns, and forced vaccinations were, at the end of the day, simply bad policy. I don't think we could have chosen a better person to move the board in a different direction. Not a whole lot was done. There wasn't a whole lot of that going on, but that does say that was basically a political appointment, right? We'll see you tomorrow.